Okay, so Sony have made a big new announcement, the new Sony A9 III, and this camera is looking like something a little bit extra special. This is something to get very excited about, especially if you're into wildlife and sports. There's a lot of tech here, a lot of new high-end, kind of next generation tech, which is looking very exciting. The specifications on this camera are crazy. We're going to take a look at that. We're going to talk about that, talk about why it's so exciting and why this is looking like the camera to beat for especially wildlife and sports. Now, just to kick us off, I've not actually had my hands on the camera yet. Hopefully we'll get a chance to do that in the next few weeks so we can do a proper full review of the camera. We do have someone at the launch event who has had a bit of time to give their thoughts on what the camera feels like, and hopefully we'll be able to do some stuff with that later on as well. But this camera is too important, too interesting to not talk about straight away. And I think we'll just dive in with the headline spec of this camera, which is that this is the first full frame mirrorless camera like this to feature a global shutter. And that is massive news, especially for sports photography and wildlife as well. So a global shutter essentially means that every pixel on that sensor is being exposed at the same time. You're not having a situation where the shutter's kind of moving like that. So one part of the sensor is exposed a fraction of a second before another part of the sensor, and you end up with things like rolling shutter. So we've probably all seen that photo of the golfer swinging the golf club as they swing back, but the golf club looks all bendy because of the rolling shutter effect, right? This should completely get rid of that. And Sony have said there is no image distortion at all. That's one of the massive benefits of a global shutter like this. And it is huge news in the world of sports photography. And like I say, wildlife, anything really fast like that, it's going to absolutely benefit from having a global shutter. This is a massive thing. It also means that the camera can shoot incredibly quickly. So shutter speeds up to 1/80,000th of a second, which is wild. I mean, that is incredibly fast. I can't imagine you'll want to shoot that fast very often, but being able to is incredible. And you also can use flash sync with any shutter speed. That's so useful, and gone are the days where you had to stick within this pretty small limit of shutter speeds to make sure your flash sync is working. Sony is saying flash sync works at any and all shutter speeds, all the way up to 1/80,000th of a second, which honestly is fantastic news, I think. So that's all big stuff that I think is worth getting genuinely very excited about. But the camera itself, just the sort of general specs of the camera, are also great. I mean, really, really lovely for the kind of stuff that you'd want to shoot with this camera. So the sensor itself is a 24.6 megapixel sensor. Now, that's not crazy. That's not some crazy resolution, but I think in terms of balancing resolution and file size, keeping things manageable, you know, especially if you're taking a lot of photos, shooting at high speed, that's probably the right resolution to choose. I don't think you need to go kind of more resolution than that. If you wanted to do something like that, you'd probably go for the A1. But I think this works really well, especially when you can shoot at such high speeds. This camera can shoot up to 120 frames a second. That's full resolution, that's blackout free, and you've got pre-capture mode as well. So if you have that turned on, then you're actually capturing before you even press the shutter. So if you just miss the start of whatever moment you're trying to capture, actually you haven't, because you've got the pre-capture mode turned on. So there's crazy speed available with this camera. And while I haven't had a chance to actually test out things like the autofocus, because I haven't had hands-on time with the camera yet, I can't imagine that that's going to be a problem. Autofocus with Sony is some of the best that you'll find on any camera in the whole industry. It's incredibly reliable, it's very fast, very sticky. The tracking is fantastic. Sony say this has the real-time subject recognition. Now, we've seen a lot of improvements to that in things like the A7R5, even the ZVE1 with the AI algorithms that have been helping to identify human poses and things like that, and just really make that autofocus even better. But this is genuinely industry-leading autofocus. So I have no doubt that that's still the case in the A9 III, if not better. I mean, we're talking 759 phase detect autofocus points, 95.6% coverage. Autofocus is not something that I'm worried about in the slightest with Sony, and certainly not in the A9 III. There's also in-body image stabilisation, which we've seen Sony improving over recent cameras that have been coming out. 8 stops here with the A9 III. That's going to be great for either slower moving subjects or, you know, if you're shooting a still subject, and of course for handheld video as well. If you're doing panning shots, that could also be with stills, but if you're doing panning shots with video, that's going to work really well handheld, which I think is very useful for the kinds of stuff you'd be shooting with this camera. And speaking of video, this is absolutely no slouch. The video specs on this camera are exactly what I hoped they'd be. 4K up to 120 frames a second. That's with no crop as well. Perfect. That's gonna be nice slow motion footage that you can get. 4K 60 is oversampled. So if you want kind of nice, very detailed, crisp 4K, it's actually oversampled as well, which is great. And then you've got 422 10-bit all-eye recording as well. So lots of ways to shoot your video, lots of versatility there, and I cannot wait to try that out. But let's talk a little bit about the body and the design of the camera, because I also think this is genuinely quite impressive as well. So Sony have said there's a new ergonomic design to the camera. And Terrence, who is actually at the launch event, has had a little bit of a chance to actually hold the camera and just play around with it just a touch, says it's incredibly comfortable to hold. He's got reasonably big hands, a little bit like me, and they just slide into that grip perfectly. It feels great. Nothing's kind of rubbing against anything, you know, knuckles touching stuff. It's all good. It all feels very, very nice. But then the buttons on the back, everything where it should be. There's a new custom button on the front, which makes control very easy while actually holding it on the grip. You've got a new speed boost button as well on the camera, which immediately takes you to the 120 frames a second mode. The body itself is a magnesium alloy body, which Sony says is comprehensively weather sealed, which for the kind of stuff, again, sports, wildlife, great news, because that's an all-weather kind of thing, right? So you are going to want to have that on the camera. And then you've got the multi-angle LCD monitor, which we've been seeing on the newer Sony cameras. I think that that's a really nice addition. I'm a big fan of it. Some people don't like it so much, but I'm a massive fan of that. I think it allows you to hold the camera in weird positions, but still actually be able to angle that monitor at yourself so you can see exactly what you're shooting. And I think, again, shooting sports or whatever it might be, you might need to put the camera into a slightly strange position, and still being able to see that monitor is just going to work out really well. But you also have a very, very nice EVF, 9.44 million dots, 120 frames a second, nice and smooth. That's fantastic resolution. That's, you know, that's up there as one of the higher resolution EVFs that you can even have, with a nice fast frame rate. Ooh. Yes, I'm very excited. Now, this isn't looking like it's going to be the cheapest camera out there, but I think in terms of a professional tool, this is able to achieve and do so much. It is absolutely wild. And the global shutter by itself, I mean, that is such an advancement in technology. That is huge news. And everything honestly sounds great. I mean, really, really top level stuff. This ticks every box that I would have had if I'd sat down and thought, what would I like to see from an A9 III? I just personally can't wait to get my hands on it, but I'd love to know, what do you think? Is this ticking all the boxes? Is this something that you're very excited about, the global shutter? How do you feel about that? Oh, excited, no? Excited. I am very excited. Is there something I'm missing though? I'd love to know what your thoughts are about this camera, so let me know down in the comments. Of course, you can check out the full spec, all the pricing, everything you want to know about the camera by following the link down in the description. Go and have a look at that, check that out for yourself. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll have more content about the A9 III, about the new 300mm lens as well, but of course about loads of other stuff. So don't forget to like and subscribe. I will see you in the next video, but until then, as always, thanks for watching.